Ellen Pompeo's new Hulu series has exactly the same plot as this 2009 horror with 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Ellen Pompeo's new Hulu drama, Good American Family, will seem familiar to horror fans as the series recycles the plot of a popular 2009 horror film. For years, Ellen Pompeo has been recognizable primarily as Meredith Grey in Grey's Anatomy. However, the actor left the medical drama and has taken on her first post-Grey's Anatomy lead role in a true crime-inspired drama thriller called Good American Family, which released its first trailer on February 19. The story fictionalizes the headline-grabbing story of Natalia Grace and her former adoptive parents, Kristen and Michael Barnett. In spring of 2010, the Barnetts adopted a little Ukrainian girl named Natalia Grace who lived with a rare form of dwarfism. The pair became convinced that Natalia was significantly older than she was, although this has since been medically proven false. They took steps to re-age her and then abandoned her. Their story became national news in 2019 when the parents were charged with child neglect. Though the Hulu show Good American Family is meant to dramatize the story of the real-life victim Natalia Grace, it is much more similar to the plot of the movie Orphan. Based on Good American Family's trailer, the series has a lot in common with Orphan. The 2009 film tells the story of a family who adopts a 33-year-old Estonian woman, pretending to be a young orphan who causes harm to a family. She ends up being a serial killer. Similarly, Good American Family tells the story of a family who adopts a woman with dwarfism who's pretending to be a young orphan from Ukraine. They soon discover that she's stolen the identity of someone else, and she's dangerous. Good American Family seems more interested in centering and sensationalizing the allegations perpetuated by the Barnetts. The decision to feature their perspective heavily partly explains why Good American Family feels so similar to Orphan. The real Natalia Grace revealed in the second season of the Investigation Discover documentary, The Curious Case of Natalia Grace, that she believes the movie Orphan inspired the Barnetts, with many of their accusations aligning with the horror film. Hopefully, the trailer is a misnomer and the Hulu series presents a more balanced picture of the actual events. Looking at the trailer for Good American Family, the biggest difference between the show and Orphan is the fact that the Hulu series reveals that the parents don't think Natalia is a child. Michael then opens up official documents that say her name but don't show her photo, implying that she isn't who she says she is. Contrastingly, Orphan keeps the age twist a secret, only revealing that Esther has become dangerous in the trailer. Anyone watching the horror film after just seeing the trailer would be in for a shock when Orphan finally reveals Esther's true identity and age. Ellen Pompeo is back, and this time she's stepping away from the hospital scrubs and into something far darker. The former Grey's Anatomy star, who defined a generation with her portrayal of Meredith Grey, is now leading Hulu's newest psychological horror series. But there's a twist. Eagle-eyed horror fans have already noticed that the premise of her latest show bears an uncanny resemblance to a certain 2009 horror flick that sits at a respectable but not spectacular 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie in question, The Uninvited. Yes, the same eerie, psychological horror film that followed a young woman's descent into paranoia, secrets, and ghostly apparitions. But while The Uninvited may have faded from mainstream horror discussions, Hulu's new series starring Pompeo is bringing it back into the spotlight, albeit under a new name and with a modernized setting. The story, Then and Now. In The Uninvited, Anna Emily Browning is released from a psychiatric institution after the tragic death of her mother. She returns home to her sister and her father, only to find that her dad has moved on with a woman she deeply distrusts. As she experiences terrifying visions and pieces together a sinister truth, Anna becomes convinced that her stepmother is hiding something deadly. The film's climactic twist reveals that Anna has been an unreliable narrator all along. Fast forward to 2025, and Hulu's untitled new series, starring Ellen Pompeo, follows an eerily similar blueprint. Pompeo plays Dr. Caroline Westfield, a renowned forensic psychologist who returns to her small hometown after her father's sudden and unexpected death. Once back in her family home, she discovers that her estranged younger half-sister, Chloe, played by Yellow Jackets star Sophie Nilles, is living with their father's much younger second wife, Rebecca, portrayed by Natalie Dormer. Almost immediately, Caroline senses that something isn't right. Chloe is distant, seemingly haunted by something no one else can see. Rebecca, meanwhile, exudes a charm that feels just a little too rehearsed. As Caroline begins experiencing eerie phenomena and uncovering long-buried family secrets, she becomes convinced that her father's death was not the accident everyone believes it to be. Why the similarities matter? Horror aficionados quickly pointed out the strong similarities between the new series and The Uninvited. Both stories center around a woman grappling with a tragic loss and uncovering unsettling truths about her family. Both feature a young, impressionable sister who may or may not be in danger. And both revolve around a stepmother figure whose motivations remain a mystery until the final moments. Even more telling, the series showrunner, Max Landon, admitted in a recent interview that The Uninvited was one of the inspirations for the series, though he insists that the show takes a different approach. "This isn't a straight remake," Landon said. "We're not just rehashing The Uninvited. We're taking that eerie, unsettling atmosphere and applying it to a completely different psychological thriller. Our story is much more about generational trauma, the way grief warps memory, and how far people will go to protect their version of the truth. How the show expands on the original premise. While The Uninvited followed a strict horror thriller format with supernatural overtones, Pompeo's Hulu series appears to be taking a more psychological, slow-burn approach. Rather than leaning into jump scares and ghostly apparitions, the series will rely on the growing sense of dread that something is deeply wrong in Caroline's family home. One of the biggest changes is the protagonist's profession. As a forensic psychologist, Caroline is trained to analyze human behavior, meaning that much of the tension will come from her second-guessing her own instincts. Is she uncovering a conspiracy, or is she simply projecting her grief onto the people around her? Additionally, the Hulu series seems to be shifting the central mystery away from the question of, is the stepmother evil, to what really happened to our father. While The Uninvited hinged on an unreliable narrator twist, this series appears to be playing with the idea of multiple conflicting truths. Each family member has their own version of what happened, and it's up to Caroline and the audience to decide which version they believe. Ellen Pompeo's horror debut. For fans of Pompeo, this new role marks an exciting departure from her long tenure as Meredith Grey. While she's dabbled in dark and dramatic moments before, she's never taken on a full-fledged horror role. This series, with its eerie atmosphere and psychological complexity, is the perfect vehicle for her to showcase a different side of her acting range. Critics are already buzzing about her performance. A source from a test screening described Pompeo's portrayal as chillingly restrained, noting that she brings a level of depth and subtlety that keeps viewers questioning her character's reliability. You can see the gears turning in her head. She's skeptical, but she's also deeply emotional, which makes her the perfect character to lead us through this web of deception. The horror remake trend. This series also falls into the growing trend of revisiting and revamping lesser-known horror films from the 2000s. With recent reboots like The Strangers, Chapter 1 in Silent Hill, Ascension gaining traction, it's no surprise that The Uninvited, a film that had an intriguing premise but never quite broke into horror's top tier, is being given a second chance in the form of a serialized drama. By expanding the story into multiple episodes, the Hulu series has the opportunity to explore themes that the film only touched upon. Grief, psychological manipulation, and the way trauma distorts memory are all being woven into the narrative in a way that makes the story feel fresh, even for those who saw the 2009 movie. Will it hold up? Of course, with so many similarities to The Uninvited, the show will inevitably invite, no pun intended, direct comparisons. Horror fans can be a tough crowd, and some might accuse the series of being a rehash rather than an homage. However, if Pompeo's performance, the eerie atmosphere, and the promise of new psychological layers deliver, this could be one of Hulu's most gripping thrillers in recent memory.